The galaxy trembled under the weight of war. Two massive alliances, the Zenith Coalition and the Morvith Dominion, clashed across star systems, their fleets darkening the skies of countless worlds. Planets once teeming with life became graveyards of glass and ash. Yet amidst this chaos, the Terran Confederacy stood silent, watching. Humanity had not chosen sides. Unlike the Coalition and the Dominion, who expended vast resources in endless battles, the Terrans had invested in their strength, growing quietly and brilliantly. This neutrality, however, was not born of fear. On the contrary, the humans possessed an eerie confidence, a quiet assurance that their time would come. In the Coalition's War Council chambers aboard the flagship Eminence, General Korvac sat at the edge of a massive holodeble. The grizzled tactician's forearms rested on its surface, his crimson skin marked with scars earned across decades of service. His voice carried the weight of experience as he addressed the gathered leaders. "We cannot afford to provoke the Terrans," Korvac warned, his sharp yellow eyes scanning the room. "Their silence is not weakness. We know little of their true capabilities, and assumptions could doom us." A scoff broke the heavy silence. Counselor Varlin, a towering insectoid diplomat, leaned forward, his mandibles clicking in disdain. "Are we to fear primitives who hide behind neutrality, General? The humans are opportunists at best, scavengers who lack the sophistication of interstellar powers like us." Korvac's jaw tightened. "Underestimate them at your peril. I have studied their history. Every war they've fought, every victory they've claimed. They do not fight unless provoked, but when they do," he paused, his voice dropping, "they do not stop." The council erupted in murmurs, some agreeing, others dismissing Korvac's concerns. The Coalition's arrogance was palpable. After all, they had withstood centuries of Dominion aggression. How could a backwater species, barely a century into interstellar travel, pose a threat? The debate was interrupted by a transmission. A Dominion attack force had breached neutral space and obliterated a Terran research station. The room fell silent as the footage played, a peaceful facility reduced to molten rubble, its civilian staff vaporized in an unprovoked strike. Korvac clenched his fists. "You fools," he muttered under his breath. On Earth, General Nathan Watson stood in the Command Operations Center, his expression as unyielding as the steel walls around him. Watson was a man who embodied discipline and resolve, his presence commanding respect. He stared at the massive screen displaying the wreckage of the research station, his jaw tightening with every passing second. "Casualty report," Watson demanded. "Over 5,000 dead, sir," replied his adjutant, Captain Zane Carter. "Civilians, scientists, families." Watson's piercing blue eyes narrowed. "And the Dominion thinks this is acceptable?" Carter hesitated before responding. "They claim it was a tactical necessity. They expect us to remain neutral." A grim smile formed on Watson's face, cold, calculating. Neutrality was their last hope. They've just shattered it. The room grew silent as Watson turned to the assembled military strategists. "Prepare Strike Force Omega. We will respond decisively." The Terran Confederacy's leaders had long understood that strength lay not in words but in action. For decades, humanity had honed its military, developing technologies far beyond the comprehension of other species. They had built fleets capable of traversing light years in moments, weapons that could annihilate entire fleets with a single strike, and soldiers trained to endure the unimaginable. Now, that strength would be unleashed. Back aboard the Eminence, Korvac watched the latest developments with dread. His warnings had gone unheeded, and now the consequences were inevitable. "Do you see what you've done?" he snarled at Varlin. "You've awakened a beast." But Varlin was unrepentant. "Let them come. We'll crush them like the Dominion." Korvac shook his head. "The Dominion doesn't understand what they provoked. And neither do you." In the cold void of space, humanity's silent preparation began to take shape. The galaxy, so consumed by its own arrogance, had yet to grasp a simple truth. Humans never entered a fight they weren't prepared to win. As the Coalition and Dominion continued their struggle, Neither side could foresee the storm that was about to break. But Korvac, in the solitude of his quarters, stared at the stars and whispered, "They will learn." Too late, but they will learn. The galaxy hung on the edge of a knife, and humanity was about to make its first cut. The Terran Confederacy's response was not hasty. It was calculated. Earth had watched the Dominion and the Zenith Coalition wage their war, gleaning every detail from intercepted transmissions and battlefield observations. Now, the time for quiet observation had passed. General Nathan Watson stood at the heart of the Confederacy's Strategic Command Center, a colossal chamber filled with glowing tactical displays and murmuring officers. The room buzzed with disciplined energy as humanity's military machine roared to life. Watson, his figure clad in a sleek black uniform adorned with the golden insignia of his rank, addressed his staff. "The Dominion believes we'll hesitate. They're wrong." His voice was calm, each word precise and deliberate. "Our response must be overwhelming. No half measures, no hesitation. They wanted to see what humanity is capable of. Let's show them." Captain Zane Carter, Watson's trusted adjutant, nodded as he brought up a hologram of the Dominion fleet formation in the Procyon system. "Strike Force Omega is ready, sir. 50 ships armed and primed, awaiting your command." The Terran fleet had been years in the making. Unlike the sprawling, often unwieldy armadas of the Coalition and Dominion, humanity's forces were compact, efficient, and devastatingly advanced. Each vessel carried experimental weaponry and armor designed to counter the chaotic nature of interstellar warfare. For decades, the Confederacy had remained silent, not out of fear, but because silence was their greatest weapon. Watson studied the hologram for a moment, his blue eyes cold and unyielding. "We'll start with Procyon. It's a key Dominion stronghold. Take it, and we carve a hole in their supply lines." A young communications officer turned from her console. "Sir, final clearance for Strike Force Omega has been received from the Council." Watson's lips twitched into a faint, grim smile. "Good. Send the order. Execute Operation Retribution." In the Procyon system, Dominion forces maintained a false sense of security. The fleet stationed there was vast, its commanders confident that no one would dare challenge them in their stronghold. This confidence was their undoing. The first human ships emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation. The brilliant Strike Force Omega's flagship led the charge, its sleek black hull absorbing the starlight. Within seconds, the Terran fleet's advanced targeting systems locked onto Dominion vessels, unleashing a volley of kinetic railgun projectiles and precision plasma strikes. Admiral Vrelak of the Dominion fleet barely had time to issue orders before the chaos began. "Shields up! Return fire!" he barked, his voice cutting through the panic erupting on the command deck. But the Dominion's response was sluggish compared to the humans' coordinated assault. Terran AI-controlled drones swarmed the Dominion ships, disabling critical systems with pinpoint accuracy. Human railgun rounds, traveling at near-light speeds, pierced enemy shields and hulls with devastating precision. Aboard the Brilliant, Watson observed the battle unfold on the main display. His demeanor remained stoic, but his words carried the weight of conviction. No wasted effort. Keep their fleet pinned. Strike where they're weakest. Captain Carter reported from his station. "Dominion losses are escalating, sir. Over a third of their fleet is disabled or destroyed." Watson nodded. "Maintain pressure. Show them what precision looks like." As Dominion ships fell, fear spread among their ranks. Dominion Admiral Vrelak attempted to rally his forces, but their traditional tactics were no match for humanity's advanced strategies and technology. The Terran fleet moved like a scalpel, cutting through the chaotic Dominion lines with ruthless efficiency. Within 2 hours, the once dominant Dominion fleet was in shambles. Their strongest ships were either obliterated or drifting in space, their systems fried. The surviving commanders scrambled to retreat, sending desperate messages back to Dominion High Command. On the Dominion Central Communications Network, Admiral Vrelak's final transmission was laced with despair. "We underestimated them. We never stood a chance. While the battle in Procyon raged, humanity launched a simultaneous ground assault on the Dominion-controlled planet of Epsilon 7. The Dominion had fortified the planet with heavily armed garrisons, believing it to be impregnable. They had not accounted for humanity's ingenuity. Terran drop ships descended through the atmosphere, deploying squads of soldiers equipped with advanced exoskeletons and neural-linked command systems. The soldiers moved as a single entity, each man perfectly aware of his squad mates' positions and objectives. Dominion ground forces were unprepared for the sheer speed and precision of the attack. Terran soldiers used terrain to their advantage, outmaneuvering and overwhelming their enemies in mere minutes. What the Dominion thought would be a prolonged siege turned into a surgical strike that left their defenses shattered. Back in the Zenith Coalition, General Korvac watched the unfolding events from his private quarters aboard the Eminence. The human assault had caught even him off guard. He had warned his superiors that humanity was dangerous, but the scale and precision of their response surpassed his expectations. A subordinate entered, his expression anxious. "General, the Terrans have routed the Dominion fleet at Procyon and taken Epsilon 7. Reports suggest they achieved this in under 5 hours." Korvac leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing as he processed the news. 5 hours? He shook his head. They didn't just retaliate, they dismantled them. The aide hesitated. "Sir, the Council wants to know, should we reconsider our stance toward the Terrans?" Korvac's response was swift. "Absolutely. If we make the same mistake the Dominion did, we'll suffer the same fate." As the Terran fleet regrouped, Watson delivered his final orders. "Broadcast this to all Dominion and Coalition forces. This is what happens when you cross the Terran Confederacy. Let Procyon and Epsilon 7 be a warning." Captain Carter hesitated before asking, "Do you think they'll listen, sir?" Watson's gaze remained fixed on the star map before him. "They'll have no choice. Fear is a powerful teacher." In that moment, the galaxy realized that humanity was no longer a silent observer. They had entered the war not as victims, but as a force to be reckoned with, a power capable of reshaping the galactic order. As the Terran fleet prepared for its next move, Watson allowed himself a moment of reflection. He thought of the lives lost on the Terran research station, the families torn apart by Dominion arrogance. His resolve hardened. "This is only the beginning," he murmured, his voice filled with quiet determination. The galaxy's power balance had shifted, and humanity had made its entry with a force that could not be ignored. The battle for the galaxy's future began in earnest the moment the Terran fleet transitioned into hyperspace. Their target, the Dominion Central Command fleet and its flagship, Sovereign Wrath, stationed in the crucial Calyx Nebula. This system, a labyrinth of dense gas clouds and volatile energy fields, had long been considered an impregnable fortress. It was where the Dominion's High Command orchestrated their war efforts and stored their most critical resources. General Nathan Watson stood aboard the Brilliant, his steely gaze fixed on the tactical map hovering before him. Around him, the hum of machinery and clipped voices of officers blended into a symphony of control and precision. Humanity's time to prove its dominance had arrived. "Engage stealth protocols," Watson ordered, his voice calm but commanding. Terran ships shimmered and vanished from sight, their advanced cloaking systems rendering them invisible to all known forms of detection. Even the Dominion's most sophisticated scanners could not pierce the technological veil humanity had perfected. The element of surprise would be theirs. The Dominion fleet, massive and imposing, drifted in tight formation around the Sovereign Wrath. Admiral Darvik, a seasoned warrior with victories spanning decades, sat in his command chair, reviewing reports from Procyon. His claws tapped rhythmically against the armrest, frustration simmering beneath his stoic exterior. The Terran's sudden emergence had thrown the Dominion into chaos, but Darvik believed their superior numbers and firepower would prevail. He was wrong. Without warning, the first strike came. From the dense nebula, Terran railgun projectiles tore through Dominion ships, striking with pinpoint accuracy. Entire cruisers were gutted before alarms could sound. The Dominion fleet scrambled to react, but the humans moved with eerie precision. Shields up, deploy countermeasures, Darvik roared, his voice cutting through the chaos. Yet the Dominion's response was sluggish. Terran ships darted between positions, their cloaking fields flickering only for brief moments as they unleashed devastating volleys of firepower. Drones swarmed the Dominion's defensive lines, disabling engines and targeting systems. Watson watched from the Brilliant's command center, his expression unreadable. Phase 1 is proceeding as planned, Captain Zane Carter reported. We've neutralized over 30% of their fleet. Good, Watson replied. Keep the pressure on. They'll try to regroup. Don't let them. The Dominion's formation began to unravel. Their ships, designed for brute force, were ill-suited to counter the surgical precision of the Terran assault. In under 2 hours, what had once been an unbreakable fortress was a battlefield littered with debris and crippled vessels. While the space battle raged, Terran ground forces descended on Calyx Prime, the Dominion's largest military installation in the system. The planet's defenses had been designed to repel sieges that could last weeks, but they were unprepared for the speed and efficiency of a human strike. Terran drop ships penetrated the atmosphere under the cover of orbital bombardments. Soldiers, clad in cutting-edge exoskeletons, hit the ground running. Their neural link systems allowed instantaneous communication and coordination, making them a single, cohesive force. Major Darius Cole led the charge. A towering figure with a voice that commanded respect, Cole embodied the determination of the Terran military. "We're not here for glory," he bellowed to his troops as they advanced. "We're here to end this." Fast and clean, Dominion ground forces fought with ferocity, but they were no match for Terran tactics. Portable energy shields absorbed incoming fire, while precision strikes from orbital satellites cleared enemy strongholds. Within an hour, the human forces had secured key installations, crippling the Dominion's ability to coordinate a counterattack. The Sovereign Wrath was the Dominion's pride, a gargantuan warship armed with weapons capable of destroying moons. Admiral Darvik, desperate to salvage the battle, ordered the remaining fleet to rally around the flagship. Watson observed their movements, his analytical mind already anticipating their strategy. "They're consolidating their forces," he said. "Classic defensive posture. They're betting everything on the Sovereign Wrath." "Your orders, sir?" Carter asked. Watson's gaze hardened. "We end this. Deploy the Brilliant's Omega Lance." The Omega Lance, a Terran superweapon, was a marvel of engineering, a focus beam of energy capable of slicing through even the thickest armor. As the Brilliant maneuvered into position, Dominion ships launched a desperate assault to protect their flagship. But humanity's fleet held firm. Using coordinated drone swarms and advanced countermeasures, they neutralized the Dominion's efforts. The Brilliant's weapon charge, its hum resonating through the ship. "Fire," Watson commanded. A blinding beam of light erupted from the Brilliant, carving through the Sovereign Wrath's shields and hull. The Dominion flagship, their symbol of dominance, split apart in a fiery explosion that illuminated the nebula. Admiral Darvik's final words, broadcast across Dominion frequencies, were filled with despair. We underestimated them. We were fools." The battle ended as quickly as it began. In just 5 hours, the Terran Confederacy had annihilated the Dominion's Central Command fleet, secured Calyx Prime, and shattered their enemies' morale. Watson stood in silence, watching the debris field through the Brilliant's viewing deck. Around him, the crew erupted in subdued cheers. They had achieved a victory that would echo across the galaxy. Captain Carter approached. "Sir, Dominion forces are signaling their surrender." Watson nodded, his expression unreadable. "Send a response. Inform them that their surrender is accepted, but there will be terms. And make sure every Dominion and Coalition leader hears this. Humanity is not to be trifled with." As the message was broadcast, Watson turned his attention to the next steps. The war wasn't over, but humanity had just announced its presence in the most decisive way possible. The galaxy would never look at them the same again. This was more than a victory. It was a warning. And Watson, ever the strategist, knew this was only the beginning of humanity's rise. The silence that followed was not of defeat, but of awe. Humanity, the silent observer, had become the galaxy's reckoning. The galaxy was never the same after the battle of Calyx Nebula. The Dominion fleet, once an unshakable force of terror, had been obliterated in mere hours. Wreckage floated in silent testimony to humanity's power, the shattered remains of the sovereign raft a grim monument to the new galactic order. General Nathan Watson stood aboard the Brilliant's observation deck, his arms crossed as he surveyed the battlefield through the reinforced viewport. The glow of distant stars was interrupted by the remnants of enemy vessels, burned-out husks of ships that had once inspired fear across countless systems. Captain Zane Carter approached, a datapad in hand. "Reports are in, sir. Total Dominion casualties exceed 90%. Their command structure has completely collapsed." He hesitated. "Admiral Darvik is confirmed dead. The Coalition has begun formal negotiations for a ceasefire." Watson nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "And the civilian population on Calyx Prime?" "Secured," Carter replied. "The locals surrendered without resistance. Our troops are overseeing humanitarian efforts." "Good," Watson said. "Send word to the fleet. Ensure all Dominion survivors are treated with dignity. This is not about vengeance. It's about ensuring they never forget what brought them here." The news of humanity's decisive victories spread like wildfire. Dominion territories, already weakened by years of overextension, descended into chaos. Governors defected, fleets mutinied, and entire worlds declared independence from their failing overlords. The once mighty empire was crumbling under the weight of its arrogance. In the Zenith Coalition, the reaction was one of cautious awe. General Korvac, who had long warned of humanity's potential, found himself thrust into the spotlight. Standing before the Coalition Council, a gathering of the galaxy's most influential leaders, he delivered a grim assessment. "The Terrans didn't just win a battle," Korvac said, his deep voice resonating through the chamber. "They reshaped the balance of power. The Dominion made the mistake of underestimating them. If we do the same, our fate will be no different." The council chamber fell silent. Leaders who had once dismissed humanity as an inconsequential backwater now grappled with the realization that Earth had become a dominant force. Back on Earth, General Watson addressed the Terran Confederacy in a rare public broadcast. His image, projected across screens on every inhabited world, exuded calm authority. "To our allies, we offer peace," Watson began, his voice steady. "To those who doubted us, let this victory serve as a reminder. Humanity is not to be provoked. We will not seek war, but we will end it if it comes to our doorstep." Cheers erupted in cities and colonies across the Confederacy. For generations, humanity had been seen as a silent observer in the galactic stage, content to focus on its own survival. Now, they were celebrated as a force capable of not only defending their own, but reshaping the galaxy. In the aftermath of the battle, the Zenith Coalition sent a delegation to Earth. General Korvac himself led the effort. Arriving aboard the Eminence, a symbol of goodwill and newfound respect. The Coalition's delegation was met with strict but professional courtesy, escorted to the heart of Terran leadership. Watson and Korvac stood across from each other in the grand chamber of the Terran High Command. The alien general, towering and broad-shouldered, inclined his head slightly. "General Watson, your victory was enlightening." Watson's expression remained neutral, but there was a flicker of satisfaction in his eyes. "And your decision to approach us now is prudent." Korvac allowed a small grin. "Prudence, indeed. The Coalition has no desire to repeat the Dominion's mistakes. We seek cooperation, not conflict." Watson studied the alien for a moment, then nodded. "Cooperation is possible, but understand this. Humanity's loyalty is earned, not given. If the coalition wishes to forge an alliance, it begins with trust. The two generals clasped hands, a moment that would be immortalized as the start of a new era. While humanity's relations with the coalition began to thaw, the Dominion faced its darkest hour. Leaders who had survived the Calyx Nebula catastrophe convened in secret, desperate to salvage what remained of their crumbling empire. Yet even among the Dominion's ranks, whispers of dissent grew louder. Soldiers who had witnessed the battle spoke of humanity's power with a mixture of fear and reverence. Some began to question the wisdom of their war-hungry leaders, while others saw humanity not as enemies, but as an ideal to emulate. The Dominion Council, fractured and divided, sent envoys to the Terran Confederacy, begging for terms of peace. For the first time in centuries, the once mighty empire found itself kneeling before an adversary. Watson, ever the strategist, ensured the terms were firm but just. "We will not eradicate the Dominion," he told his advisors, "but we will dismantle its capacity for war. Let them rebuild, but let them remember the cost of their hubris." As the dust settled, the galaxy entered a new chapter. Humanity, once overlooked and underestimated, had claimed its place among the stars. Their victory at Calyx Nebula was not merely a display of military might. It was a statement of intent. Back aboard the Brilliant, Watson stood on the bridge, his hands clasped behind his back. The stars stretched before him, infinite and full of possibility. "Sir," Carter said, breaking the silence, "the Dominion has officially signed the peace accords. Hostilities are over." Watson nodded, but his expression remained thoughtful. "Wars end, Captain, but the lessons they teach endure. Ensure those lessons aren't forgotten." As the Brilliant prepared to return to Earth, Watson allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. The galaxy had underestimated humanity, but they would not make that mistake again. This was not just a victory for Earth. It was the dawn of a new era. And while humanity had claimed its place among the stars, Watson knew the real challenge was just beginning. For in the endless void of space, peace was as fragile as a whisper, and strength was its only guarantee. And so, humanity stood ready, not as conquerors, but as guardians of their own destiny.